army ants do not build nests of dirt or leaves. They create living structures from their own bodies. They build their fortress entirely out of their own living bodies. Linking their hooked claws, they form an impenetrable biological shield. This living nest, called a bivouac, constantly shifts to regulate temperature. Deep within the heart of the bivouac lies the engine of the empire. The queen is a massive biological factory. She produces up to 30,000 eggs every single day. Millions of hungry larvae demand an endless supply of fresh meat. Driven by their hunger, a chemical alarm ripples through the colony. The biological fortress suddenly begins to dissolve. Millions of soldiers pour onto the forest floor like a dark waterfall. Every single ant in this horde is completely blind. They navigate a chaotic world entirely through chemical pheromone trails. The army deploys a terrifying tactic, the swarm raid. The front line expands to over 20 meters wide, advancing relentlessly. Every leaf, every twig, every shadow is meticulously searched. Prey species often rely on camouflage to survive. The army deploys a terrifying tactic, the swarm raid. The cricket fights back, kicking with immense power. But for every ant it repels, 100 more take its place. Major soldiers arrive, delivering lethal, paralyzing bites. In mere seconds, the giant is dismantled and carried away. The sound of the advancing swarm sends shockwaves of terror through the jungle. Apex predators are suddenly reduced to panicked refugees. Everything that can run, runs. Everything that can climb, climbs. Those too slow to flee are instantly swallowed by the black tide. The swarm is an absolute biological vacuum, erasing life from the forest floor. But the swarm is about to face a true monster, a Goliath Tarantula. Armed with venomous fangs, it is a formidable killing machine. The tarantula strikes, crushing dozens of ants in a single blow. It kicks a cloud of toxic, irritating hairs to repel the invaders. The front line shatters. But can a single giant defeat 1,000,000 soldiers? Chemical alarms flood the air. The swarm responds with terrifying speed. Individual lives mean nothing. They charge fearlessly into the jaws of death. They swarm the giant, targeting its eyes and vulnerable leg joints. The invincible giant thrashes in absolute agony, drowning in a sea of mandibles. Paralyzed by thousands of stings, the titan finally falls. With the giant dead, the soldiers transition into highly efficient butchers. Major soldiers use their massive jaws to saw through the thick armor. Working in perfect unison, they dismantle the massive carcass. A high-speed supply line instantly forms to carry the protein back to the nest. In mere minutes, the Goliath is completely erased from existence. The supply line is moving fast, but a major obstacle blocks the path. A wide chasm halts the march. It is impossible for a single ant to jump. Blind workers wave their antennae over the terrifying void. Traffic instantly jams. Millions of hungry larvae are waiting for this food. With no tools and no sight, how do they conquer the impossible? They do not build bridges, they become the bridge. Ant after ant locks claws, suspending their bodies over the abyss. The living chain swings across and hooks onto the opposite side. Instantly, heavy traffic resumes, marching directly over the backs of their sisters. The living bridge bears the immense weight flawlessly. A miracle of biology. To protect this vital supply line, the army deploys its heavy infantry. Major soldiers are giants, armed with terrifying ice-pick mandibles. They form a living, heavily armed guardrail, protecting the workers. Any predator that approaches is instantly repelled by a wall of blades. This flawless military discipline guarantees the survival of the empire. But even this invincible army has a nemesis that strikes from above. The phorid fly. A microscopic, lightning-fast parasitic killer. It aims to inject a single egg directly into the head of a worker. The massive soldiers snap blindly at the air, entirely useless against this threat. How does a ground army defend against an invisible airstrike? Realizing they cannot fight, the ants execute a brilliant defensive maneuver. Tiny workers jump onto the massive heads of the soldiers. They wave their legs wildly, acting as a living anti-aircraft shield. The frustrated fly is swatted away, unable to find a clear target. This bizarre piggyback formation allows the army to march on in safety. The chaos of the swarm attracts opportunists. Meet the antbirds. They do not eat the ants. They are here to steal the refugees. As insects flush in panic, the birds snatch them effortlessly from the air. They dance dangerously close to the snapping jaws, stealing the army's hard work. The blind army ignores them, completely focused on the massacre below. The unstoppable wave suddenly hits an impenetrable wall of hardened mud. They have reached a towering termite mound, a heavily fortified superfortress. Inside, another highly organized army is waiting. Simultaneously, a low, suspenseful cinematic, the invaders attempt a breach, and the defenders instantly retaliate. This is a clash of empires. But the termites have a terrifying secret weapon. The termites deploy their elite defenders, the snout soldiers. They shoot a stream of thick, highly toxic, sticky acid from their heads. The acid glues the ant's legs together, burning it alive. A synchronized chemical barrage creates an impenetrable wall of poison. The army and front line takes massive casualties. The siege is failing. Realizing a frontal assault is suicide, the brilliant hive mind shifts tactics. Major soldiers use their massive jaws as pickaxes, attacking a weaker wall. Through sheer brute force, they tear a massive breach directly into the fortress. Bypassing the defenders, the horde floods directly into the vulnerable nurseries. The slaughter is absolute. The fortress has fallen. Victory is short-lived. The Amazon sky suddenly turns pitch black. Massive tropical rain begins smashing into the exposed trail. A single heavy raindrop is enough to crush and drown an ant. Flash floods begin to form, threatening to wash the entire army away. Trapped in the open during a deluge, how can the colony possibly survive? Displaying ultimate survival engineering, the ants execute an impossible maneuver. They interlock their bodies tightly, forming a solid, dense canopy. They construct a massive, living umbrella entirely out of themselves. Underneath this living roof, the supply line continues to march, completely dry. The ultimate sacrifice of the few guarantees the survival of the many. As quickly as it began, the torrential storm passes, leaving behind a refreshed and vibrant jungle. The living shield detects the sunlight and begins to unhook. They drop seamlessly back into the column, their duty fulfilled. The invincible machine resumes its march, seemingly unfazed. Intense chemical trails guide them flawlessly back toward the home base. But the ultimate test of the superorganism is approaching. The Giant Anteater, the most devastating nemesis of any insect colony. Its highly sensitive nose easily locks onto the massive chemical trail. It tears up the ground with massive, curved claws, exposing the swarm. Can a micro-army possibly defeat a 2-meter-long, heavily armored titan? The Anteater unleashes a 2-foot-long, in a single flick, hundreds of ants are glued and swallowed alive. It whips its tongue like a rapid-fire weapon, causing absolute devastation. Chemical alarms flood the air. The swarm shifts from flight to pure aggression. Instead of fleeing, the blind army charges directly at the giant. Displaying suicidal bravery, they literally crawl up the weapon attacking them. They bypass the heavy fur and target the most sensitive organ, the wet nose. Hundreds of major soldiers sink their ice-picked jaws deep, injecting burning venom. The agony is instant. The titan violently thrashes, trying to wipe them off. Overwhelmed by the microscopic agony, the giant retreats in defeat. The titan is repelled, but the trail is in ruins. Without hesitation, workers release organizing pheromones to rebuild the path. They recover the dropped spoils of war and immediately fall back into line. In minutes, the chaotic battlefield snaps back into a highly disciplined march. The superorganism marches on, completely unfazed by death. The final obstacle before home is a massive, slippery, vertical cliff. Workers struggle to maintain their grip while hauling heavy meat. One slip means losing the precious food they fought so hard for. The column stalls. Gravity itself is fighting against them. How does the hive mind solve the problem of gravity? Once again, they engineer a brilliant biological solution. They anchor themselves to the smooth wall, forming a living ladder. A textured highway of living bodies forms straight up the cliff face. The workers carrying the heavy loads now have perfect grip. Selfless cooperation completely defies the laws of physics. As twilight descends, the exhausting day of raiding comes to an end. The victorious army finally arrives back at the biological fortress. Deep inside, millions of hungry larvae feast on the fresh protein. The queen's endless production is fueled by the day's brutal harvest. The final stragglers return, and the fortress seals itself for the night. The chaotic horde transforms back into a silent, pulsing sphere. The unbreakable bonds hold strong in the perilous dark. But they will not stay here for long. They are a nomadic empire. In a few days, they will move on, leaving a trail of destruction behind. A single blind ant is fragile, lost, and completely powerless, but bound together by chemistry and absolute loyalty. They become one of the most brilliant, terrifying, and invincible forces on Earth. The Amazon respects nothing but power and adaptability. A single blind ant is fragile, lost, and completely powerless, but bound together by chemistry and absolute loyalty. They become one of the most brilliant, terrifying, and invincible forces on Earth. The Amazon respects nothing but power and adaptability. And the blind army rules them all.